Almost every episode, I ask you to go to the website and ask a question. Well, today I'll answer a question about executive orders. Next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and we teach the rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me. As always, please head over to that website, constitutionstudy.com. Ask a question. Who knows, it may end up in one of these videos. It's also where you can follow what I'm working on. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can get these episodes delivered directly to your inbox when I release them. And you can find out where I'm going to be speaking now that we're seem to be in the tailing end of COVID-19. I'm starting to get some speaking engagements, and I'm hoping you'll join me there because I'd love to meet you face to face. So what is an executive order? Well, it's really pretty simple. You see, if you look at the Constitution, Article 2 says the executive power of the government is vested in one person, a president of the United States. But we all know we have an executive branch because one man couldn't do all the work. He has cabinet officers and other departments that are part of the executive branch, and all an executive order is a memo from the chief executive to his or her underlings, letting them know what the current policy is. So if a president wants to give an order saying, Department of Agriculture, you are to do this, or Department of Agriculture, you're not to do this, or something along those lines, he issues an executive order. Now, they're nothing new. We didn't call them executive orders. We didn't record them the way we do now until relatively recently. But George Washington issued executive orders. He issued orders to the executive branch of the very first government. Executive orders are not law. They're directions from the chief executive to his or her underlings, letting them know how they are to execute the power we vested in that individual. And that's kind of the important point, right? Because the power is vested in a president. And if the president's going to get work done, they are directing their underlings of how to exercise the power that's been vested in him, or one day her. Now, the states have governors. That's the chief executive of the state government. And the governors are invested with the executive power of the state government. And they also have underlings, so they often issue executive orders to their underlings to tell them how to execute the power that's vested in that single person. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. There's nothing special or magical about them. They're just orders from a superior to an inferior, which is an important point. There's a jurisdiction for executive orders. In other words, the president can't issue an executive order ordering the judiciary or the legislature to do something. That's outside of his jurisdiction. In fact, he can't order states to do anything because that's outside of his jurisdiction. All he can do is order executive agencies how to execute the power that's been vested in him. That brings us to a very interesting question. So what about executive orders that violate the Constitution, that go beyond their jurisdiction or the capabilities of an executive, whether it be the president issuing executive orders or governors? We've had a lot of experience lately with governors issuing executive orders. So what do we do when an executive order goes beyond the powers delegated to the chief executive of that government? Well, there's a few places we can go to understand this. And the first place we're going to go to is Article 6, Clause 2, called the Supremacy Clause. And it reads, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state, to the contrary, notwithstanding." So the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Now, somewhere out there, I'm sure someone's saying, and U.S. laws, federal laws, except, what does it say? Laws of the United States made in pursuance of the Constitution. So only a law of the United States made pursuant to the Constitution, meaning not only following its form, but following the authority. Only that is considered supreme. And that all the judges in every state are required, they are bound to that Constitution. If the state constitution and the federal constitution are in conflict, the federal constitution wins. If the laws of a state are contrary to the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Constitution wins. That's what it means to be the supreme law of the land. Okay, now we get to the tricky part, or the interesting part, depending on how you look at it. So what do we do? Now, Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist Number 78, quote, "There is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of a delegated authority contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it is exercised is void." What is he saying? He said there's a basic principle that an act of a delegated authority contrary to its commission is void. Well, let's think about this for a minute. How is the presidency of the United States created? Well, it was created by the Constitution, right? Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 vests the executive power with a president. So the president has authority delegated to him based on what the Constitution says. So there's a clear principle that an act of a delegated authority, which the president is, contrary to the tenor of his commission, which is the U.S. Constitution, well, that's void. And this goes for governors as well. A governor is a delegated position. It is created by the state constitution. So an act of a governor that is contrary to the delegated authority that they've been given, that is contrary to the tenor of the commission that they've been given, is void. In fact, this is not just my idea, and it's not just Alexander Hamilton's idea. Even the Supreme Court Chief Justice Marshall in the case Marbury versus Madison said, quote, "Thus the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle, supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts as well as other departments are bound by that instrument." A law that is repugnant to the Constitution is void. Well, if a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, what about an executive order? It's still an act of a delegated authority contrary to its commission. It is void. And notice he says not just courts, but other departments are bound by that instrument. Because Article 6, Clause 3 of the Constitution requires that most state and federal officials swear or affirm support to the Constitution of the United States. So when someone mentions an executive order, whether it's a governor or the president, first thing you want to do is look at it and say, okay, what are they actually doing? Are they issuing an order to their underlings to how to properly execute their authority? Or are they doing something outside of their commission? Are they exercising a delegated authority, or are they violating the commission of that delegated authority? If they are exercising a delegated authority, that is that's how they do it. That's their proper role. If they are violating that delegated authority, if they are going beyond the bounds of their commission, well, then that instrument is void. Now, the problem we run into is courts and legal systems have been so wrapped up in the supposedly unlimited authority of government that they forgot this most basic tenet, that an act repugnant to the Constitution is void, that an act contrary to a delegated authority is void. You don't have a legitimate legal requirement to follow an executive order that violates the Constitution. The problem is you're going to be held accountable. This is where we as Americans have to learn to stand up and grow a little bit of backbone. You see, we have to ask ourselves, what's more important? Is it standing up for what's right, or for being considered good boys and girls? Look at the case of Shelley Luther. She's standing before a judge who basically told her, bend the knee, be a good little plebe, be a good little serf, and we let you go home. If not, we're going to throw you in jail. And she said, you tell me, is upholding a law or feeding my children more important? Do what you're going to do. We the people need to stand up and say, wait a second, that law is void. Why? Because it is created contrary to the commission of the office that established it, therefore it is void. It is a violation, it's repugnant to the Constitution, therefore it is void. And excuse me, Judge, but you swore an oath. You swore or affirmed to support the Constitution. To do this, to punish me for following the Constitution, is your fault. It is your mistake. It is your error, not mine. Does that mean you're going to get out of jail? Shelley Luther got sent to jail. But what's more important to you? The fact that you may get an arrest on your record, or that you and your children live in a free country. See, when we talk about free, we're not talking about no cost. There's going to be a cost to maintaining freedom. Are we ever going to decide it's worth paying that cost? Because if not, these executive orders, well, they're a bit of a misnomer. If we let governors and the president do whatever they want and we're unwilling to stand up to them, well, then they're not executives. They're kings. And these aren't executive orders. They're royal decrees. And the only thing stopping an executive order from becoming a royal decree are the people of the United States of America. So what do you think? You know, we talk about executive orders all the time, but I don't know that we always sit down and think, what do they actually mean? What are they? So hopefully this has helped you understand what an executive order is, understand a little bit of the boundaries. I found it very good practice to actually read an executive order, because you'd be surprised how many times I'm told what an executive order says, only to read it something very, very different. So I hope you found that useful. Head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You know, make a suggestion, ask a question. Who knows, it might become a video. Hopefully you found this was worth your time, and I'll see you again the next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand.